Welcome to the Power of Peacefulness, where women in leadership learn to lead with calm, clarity, and confidence. Today, we're talking about something that often feels mysterious, yet it plays a huge role in leadership advancement: executive presence. Executive presence is often described as the difference between leaders who have good ideas and those who are trusted to lead major decisions. Two people can present the exact same idea in a meeting, but one person is perceived as strategic, credible, and authoritative, while the other is overlooked. For women in leadership, learning how to build executive presence can be transformative. It influences how quickly people trust your judgment, whether your ideas gain traction, and whether you are seen as someone who can guide a team or organization through uncertainty. Research from the Center for Talent Innovation found that executive presence accounts for about 26% of what it takes to be promoted to leadership roles. That means even highly competent professionals may be passed over if they don't project confidence, clarity, and authority in high stakes moments. But here's the good news: executive presence is not about personality or charisma, it's a skill. And like any leadership skill, it can be learned. Most leadership researchers describe executive presence as the ability to project confidence, composure, and clarity in a way that inspires trust and followership. To understand how to build executive presence, we first need to talk about perception. Our brains are wired to make rapid judgments about competence and authority. Research in social psychology shows that people form impressions of credibility within seconds of meeting someone. These impressions are strongly influenced by nonverbal signals like posture, tone of voice, and facial expression. Because the brain relies on these quick shortcuts, what psychologists call heuristics, small signals can dramatically shape how others interpret your authority. The Center for Talent Innovation describes executive presence as having three key pillars: gravitas, communication, and appearance. Gravitas refers to how you act under pressure. Communication refers to how clearly and persuasively you speak. And appearance refers to how you present yourself physically. Interestingly, gravitas is considered the most important factor. In one study, 67% of executives said gravitas was the defining trait of executive presence. So, what exactly signals gravitas? One major factor is composure under pressure. When people feel stressed, the body activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which triggers a release of cortisol. This is part of the body's stress response. Cortisol can cause what psychologists sometimes call leaky behaviors. These include fidgeting, speaking quickly, raising your vocal pitch, or interrupting others. Even if your ideas are excellent, these subtle signals can make you appear less confident. So, the first step to building executive presence is learning to regulate your nervous system. Before an important meeting or presentation, try a simple technique supported by neuroscience. Pause for 60 seconds and focus on slow breathing. Inhale slowly for 4 seconds. Hold briefly, then exhale for 6 seconds. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps calm the stress response and improves cognitive clarity. You might also use a phrase that demonstrates calm leadership in the moment. For example, instead of reacting quickly when a discussion becomes tense, you might say, "Let's pause for a moment and look at the data before we make a decision." That type of response signals composure and strategic thinking. Another foundation of executive presence is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to recognize and regulate emotions, both your own and those of others. Research consistently shows that leaders with high emotional intelligence are perceived as more effective and more trustworthy. Emotionally intelligent leaders remain thoughtful during stressful conversations rather than becoming reactive. One practical way to strengthen emotional intelligence is to reflect on emotional triggers. At the end of the day, ask yourself, what situation today made me feel defensive or frustrated? What response would have reflected the leader I want to become? This type of reflection builds awareness and gradually improves emotional regulation. Now let's talk about communication. Communication is one of the most visible components of executive presence. Leaders with strong executive presence speak clearly and concisely. They avoid language that undermines their authority. Many professionals unintentionally weaken their message with qualifiers like, I just wanted to say, or this might be wrong, but instead, confident leaders communicate with clarity. For example, instead of saying, this might be wrong, but maybe we should explore another option, you could say, I recommend we explore an alternative approach based on the data we've reviewed. That shift may seem small, but it dramatically changes how your message is perceived. Another communication strategy that strengthens executive presence is the strategic pause. Leaders with strong presence are comfortable with silence. Imagine you are presenting financial data and say, our operating costs increased by 22% this quarter. Then pause briefly before continuing. That pause draws attention to your point and signals confidence. Structured communication is another powerful technique. Instead of presenting scattered thoughts, organize your message clearly. You might say, there are 3 issues we need to address today. Or, let me outline 2 possible solutions. This type of structure makes it easier for your audience to follow your reasoning. Now, let's talk about body language. Research shows that first impressions are heavily influenced by nonverbal communication. In fact, studies suggest that posture, eye contact, and tone of voice can shape perceptions of credibility even more strongly than words. To project executive presence, start with posture. Stand or sit upright with relaxed shoulders. This communicates confidence and attentiveness. Next, focus on eye contact. When speaking in meetings, briefly connect with several people in the room. Eye contact signals engagement and credibility, and pay attention to gestures. Purposeful hand movements can emphasize key points, while fidgeting or crossing your arms can signal discomfort. Let's imagine 2 different scenarios. In the first scenario, a leader presents an idea while looking down at notes, speaking quickly, and avoiding eye contact. In the second scenario, the leader stands upright, makes eye contact, and speaks slowly and clearly. Even if the content is identical, the second leader will almost always be perceived as more credible. Executive presence is also strengthened through decisive thinking. Leaders who hesitate excessively or present ideas as tentative suggestions may unintentionally undermine their authority. Instead, frame your ideas as recommendations supported by evidence. For example, you might say, based on our performance metrics from the past quarter, I recommend reallocating resources toward this initiative. Notice the difference between suggesting and recommending. You can also acknowledge uncertainty while remaining decisive. For example, while the data are still evolving, the evidence suggests this direction will give us the best outcome. That approach communicates both humility and leadership. Authenticity also plays an important role in executive presence. Leadership research shows that authentic leaders, those whose actions align with their values, are more likely to earn trust from their teams. One way to demonstrate authenticity is to explain your reasoning. Instead of simply issuing directives, explain why a decision matters. You might say, we are prioritizing this project because it aligns with our long-term strategy. Another way to demonstrate authenticity is by acknowledging mistakes. For example, I made an incorrect assumption about the timeline. Here is how we will adjust our approach. That level of accountability builds credibility. Perhaps the most defining trait of executive presence is composure under pressure. Leaders are constantly being observed during moments of stress. Teams watch how their leaders react during conflict, uncertainty, and crises. Research shows that leaders who remain calm during challenging situations inspire greater confidence from their teams. One helpful technique for maintaining composure is cognitive reappraisal. This involves reframing stressful situations. Instead of thinking, this presentation could go terribly wrong, try reframing the situation as, this is an opportunity to demonstrate leadership. This mental shift can reduce anxiety and improve performance. Another technique is simply slowing your speech. When people are nervous, they often speak quickly. Slowing your speech signals control and confidence. You can also pause before responding to criticism. If someone challenges your idea, you might say, that's an important point. Let me think about it for a moment. That response signals thoughtfulness rather than defensiveness. Finally, remember that meetings are daily opportunities to practice executive presence. Speak early in meetings rather than waiting until the end. Ask thoughtful questions like, what assumptions are we making in this model? And if someone repeats your idea later in the discussion, calmly reinforce your contribution. You might say, yes, that aligns with the point I raised earlier about reallocating resources. Learning to build executive presence is not something that happens overnight. It develops through deliberate practice. You might spend 1 month focusing on communication clarity, the next month focusing on body language and presentation skills, and another month strengthening decision making confidence. Over time, these skills compound. Executive presence is not about pretending to be someone else. It's about aligning your communication, composure, and confidence so that your expertise is recognized and trusted. When leaders build executive presence, they command attention in meetings, navigate pressure with calm authority, and inspire confidence in those around them. And perhaps most importantly, executive presence ensures that your voice and your vision carry the influence they deserve. Make sure to like, subscribe, and grab my free leadership workbook, 5 Steps to Communicate with Calm, Clarity, and Confidence at powerofpeacefulness.com. Until next time, take a deep breath. Embrace the present moment and keep walking your path to peace.